Pleasure to be here this morning, and I'm going to apologise for a couple of remarks to start with. I've had to change my presentation right at the last minute because I was going to give a presentation on how to submit a successful IDOC application, but I'm saving that for a future conference. And anyone sitting around the room next to anyone from a water company and they're scribbling away taking notes, be under no illusion, they're not taking notes of my speech, they're still writing their business plans. And if they're not writing their business plans, now they'll be wondering why they're not writing their business plans and will be dashing off to do it shortly. But I'm going to try and sort of meander through the next sort of 15 minutes or so, picking up some key points with respect to the industry and where we are today, but also setting a bit of a flavour for perhaps what you're going to see over the next couple of days, because it is quite an exciting time and an exceptionally busy time for the industry. And perhaps the biggest theme you're going to see over the speeches over the next 2 days is going to be the subject of customers. This industry has moved massively over recent years, but beyond anything else, when you see those business plans when they're published, I can almost guarantee that the one common thread you're going to see for all the business plans from all the companies will be putting the customers first. And what are our customers actually looking for and what do they want for the future? And that's certainly been the focus of our business plan, and some of the themes that we've seen have been quite remarkable in terms of what our customers have been telling us, but also the way we've gone about it has actually massively changed. You will hear more and more about the role of the customer challenge groups and what they brought to the business plans and how they've been holding the companies to account to ensure that customers' views have been taken into account. From our point of view, we've embarked on our largest ever research programme, over 50 pieces of research, literally talking and engaging with tens of thousands of customers. That's involved not just questionnaires, surveys, research sessions, visiting shopping centres, displays, any sort of show you can think of, we've been there, but where we are now, we're currently going through the final stages of the customer acceptability testing. Again, something new in terms of supporting the business plans. So that's a big change and you're going to see far more of that. But what have our actual customers told us? Well, the messages have been quite simple and quite straightforward in terms of what we've been looking to do in terms of supporting that business plan. First one, in terms of customer service, well, if customers have a problem, but the fact is most of our customers very, very rarely have the need to contact us at all. They turn on the tap, they want the water to be there, they flush the loo and they want it to go away. But the customers that do have the need to contact, they want two things. They want us to deal with their problems quickly and they want us to get it right first time. In the main, customers are satisfied with the services they receive and are satisfied with the prices they pay. But our two main priorities are continuing to drive down leakage, which will always be in the spotlight and will always be on the front of the newspapers, and also to prevent houses flooding from sewage. There can't be a worse experience for customers than having their houses flooded with sewage. They're the two big messages that come out time and time again in all the research we do. But perhaps the biggest agenda, and it will be touched on, I'm sure, over the next couple of days and probably this morning, the whole subject of affordability. And that is going to get more and more important, not only today, but clearly as we move towards the election, but also in terms of actually recognising where we are today in the economic environment. And the message again is clear from customers. They enjoy the services they receive, they always look for improvement, but at the same time they don't want the bills to go up. But what you've got to do is look across this industry and see where the companies are, because we're all at different stages in our life. Some of the companies have already invested massively in terms of improvement programs, and particularly around the coast. And as a result, you'll see in some areas, customer bills are higher than other areas. Some companies have still got a huge amount of investment still to manage. I'm not going to spend too much time dwelling on the Thames tunnel this morning, but you could argue that what we're having to face in Thames water, we're trying to clean up the Thames in the same way that some of the other companies have had to clean up the coastline. So it's not surprising when we talk about our average bill as being one of the lowest in the company, it compares favourably to some of the higher bills. But unlike the energy industry, we're not talking about 1 or 2% or maybe 3 or 4%. You're talking about a difference of maybe 30 or 40% difference between the bills around the country. So is it right just to have this mantra that we've got to keep bills flat or reducing? Because there are trade-offs if we take that approach. We mustn't be short-sighted in terms of what we're trying to do. We need to recognise that in certain areas of this country, we need to invest in the infrastructure. We need to replace those assets that are 100+ years old and are starting to fail. We need to maintain the service, we need to maintain the quality. And it's a bit like the energy industry as well. We also need to maintain the investment and we need to attract the investors. This industry has been extremely successful since privatisation, with over £100 billion invested. And we've still got a lot of investment still to go, and we've got to make sure that we've got the investors there to provide the money that sits behind us. But if we get back to that theme of affordability, because it is a big issue for customers, just a flavour of some of the things that are actually going on at the moment, and this is just from a Thames Water perspective. And we're no different to the other companies. We all, as an industry companies, provide some help now to customers. We have assistance funds, we have trust funds. We have ways that we can actually help customers to pay for their water and indeed some of their other bills as well. But where are we going next? We are looking to introduce social tariffs so that we actually help the people that can't pay. Not the people that won't pay, but the people that can't pay. And that's a big difference. We're also looking to put additional support in for those customers that do need help, not just in terms of the bills they pay, but actually the water they use. So continuing to push the water efficiency message, continuing to provide people with the water efficiency devices in their homes. And in terms of looking at how we help them, and again on social tariffs, also when we're looking at actually their benefits entitlement, how can we help those customers claim what they're entitled to help them pay their bills. But improvements for the future? Landlord liability, a big issue, and particularly one for us in Thames Water. A large proportion of our properties across London particularly are actually converted flats. A large proportion of those converted flats are actually rented properties. And what we have at the same time, particularly in the current economic environment, a very transient population. And actually the landlords don't mind, because the landlords currently aren't liable for paying the bills. And the biggest challenge we have is finding out who are in those properties and where are they and how can we actually recover our costs from them. That's a big issue for us. And actually, if we can find those people, have we got the right powers to actually recover that money, and can we recover it quickly and can we recover it cheaply? And that's something that I'd also like to see far more weight behind. Moving on, in terms of once you've got the plan, you know what your customer wants, and it's affordable for customers, what is the best model for delivery? I'm not talking about CapEx delivery, and I'm not talking about OpEx delivery, because we're going to a brand new world now of looking at a new range of working, new way of working in terms of TOTEX, so it is the best model for delivery. And this is where we've actually moved on from where we used to be, because we've already formed our alliance for the delivery of AMP6. And you'll see the names up there, you'll see the big names up there in terms of MWH, Skanska, Balfour Beatty, Veolia, Atkins, Costain. But the one I wanted to highlight in terms of the presentation this morning is IBM, because that's something different. Alliances have been formed in the past for CapEx delivery and actually engineering, but what we're getting into now is the whole solution. And that's why IBM is a different approach in terms of how we're working now. IBM are in there as the innovation and technology partner, bringing more to the party in terms of actually how do we understand our assets, how do we understand the data, what is the optimal solution, not just what's the delivery solution. So it's a big difference to how we've worked in the past. And as you can see, quite an exciting bunch of individuals around the table. You can spot the IBM person, he's the one with the spiky hair. Okay. But this has been a new approach for us, and what I'm really proud to say, this team's actually up and running. I was talking to the Alliance Director only earlier this morning, just in terms of how things are going and what's our next sort of big push, because these guys have been engaged with us, they're already up and running, and they've been developing our business plan with us. The approach we took to the actual selection process and the tender process wasn't a traditional approach where you actually send out reams and reams of tender documents and ask people to spend months and months in terms of pricing those documents. This was about making sure that we're working with the right organisations, but more importantly, we're working with the right people. And I'm a strong believer in people. And the focus isn't on cost, it's on value. And too many people still continue to focus on cost, when we should be far more times focusing on the value. So they're up and running. We're up and running 2 years ahead of the start of the AMP6 cycle, but we're already in there and the team are already working away. But what are they working away on? What solutions? Striking the balance on the solutions. I keep stressing it's not just about pure construction, it's not just about in terms of putting concrete in the ground, there's a wider approach to take. And I suspect what you're going to hear more of over the next couple of days is actually taking a wider view, looking at catchment solutions, catchment services, catchment management, and it's not just about the water companies working on their own. It's about working with the wider stakeholders. And just to touch on that in a little bit more detail, because you keep getting into the arguments, well, is it about engineering or is it about something different? And quite often there are some really difficult solutions and decisions to make. Hard or soft solutions. What you see behind me is a photo of the Lee Tunnel that's currently under construction. This is now over 80% complete, but purely by coincidence it's the same tunnel or same diameter as the Thames Tideway Tunnel. Now there's no dimensions on that photo, but that's the size of 3 double-decker buses side by side. Now I keep getting asked the question, Martin, do you really need to build that Thames Tideway Tunnel? Can't you do it by suds? Well, if I told you that if we need to do it by suds, we need a green area something like 40 times the size of Hyde Park, and we need to demolish Kensington and Chelsea, that would be a good solution. But when you've got a tunnel that diameter, 20 miles long, and if you can imagine a tunnel, 3 double-decker buses side by side, 20 miles long, and totally full of sewage, that's what we're having to deal with in London. 39 million tonnes of raw sewage goes into the River Thames every year. And it's not after heavy rainfall. The discharges will be going off this morning after that brief shower we saw earlier. 2 millimetres of rain in London and we're discharging raw sewage into the Thames. That is not sustainable. But what is sustainable is having the hard solution but supported by the soft solutions going into the future. So we're promoting SUDS and some of the catchment management solutions more and more to make those hard solutions work for longer. And there are other challenges as well. You come back to the affordability challenge, and actually what you see in terms of the cost of actually solving houses from flooding is increasing year on year. 10 years ago, the average cost to prevent a house from flooding, £40,000. Where do we stand today? Over £200,000. So some of the hard solutions that we'd have adopted years ago are no longer sustainable. More and more push in terms of looking at alternatives. And one example of it on a very small scale is one of the partnerships that we've currently got with Southwark. Because neither us nor Southwark can solve all the solutions. Clearly we can't do it on our own. But working together with the local authorities, with the local communities, we can actually start promoting better solutions for the future. And it's not just in Southwark, because what we're doing right across the region, more and more of these opportunities are coming up, and I'm sure you're going to hear more about it in some of the presentations that you're going to see over the next 2 days. But sometimes it's not just about short-term solutions, there's also the bigger picture, because we are in a changing environment, not just an economic environment, but also an environmental environment. And last year, from an environmental point of view, and also a water supply point of view, was probably one of the worst years we've ever seen. And last year, as you will all recall, was the great year of the Olympics, but I sat here in the spring really worrying about what was going to happen as we're going into that summer after that horrible period of no rain. And because we were running at about 60% of average rainfall. And what you see here on the slide before me is as the storage drops with that 60% rainfall, where do you end up in terms of some of the restrictions you're going to have to impose on actually customers. And you go through the various restrictions, starting with the green area of media campaign, ending up into the red area of emergency restrictions. And what were we forecasting at the start of last year? We were forecasting to head into emergency restrictions literally during the opening of the Olympic Games. That would not have been a good place for us to be as a company. It wouldn't have been a good place for us to be as London. That's an area where you don't want to go. But people say, well, Martin, that can never happen. You never get there. Things always turn out okay. Well, it's all right saying that after the event, but actually the probability of things turning out okay was only a 3% chance, because we actually received 153% of the average rainfall during the spring to restore that storage. So a 3% chance. We got out of it. If you heard the Minister talk last year, he said we were dodging a bullet, and we did. Because actually, what's the chance of that 3%? Well, on one side of that graph, on the far side, the probability of receiving 153% of the rainfall, 3%. The probability of receiving 60% of the rainfall, 3%. It's a bit like tossing a coin, really. Which way was it going to go? Can you afford to take that chance going forward? Well, of course we can. We always do it. We always get out of it. But if you were managing London, would you take that chance? I don't know. What would it cost London? Well, actually, not a lot really, because if we actually go to the level 3 restrictions, and that's where we were imposing a drought order, it could cost London in pure economic terms between £4 to £9 million a day. Well, London's a big city, it can wear that. That's okay, we can take that risk. But what happens if you go to level 4? Level 4, emergency restrictions, £300 million a day. But actually, if you go to level 4 restrictions, you don't do it by the day. Once you get into that sort of territory, it's not a matter of days, it's a matter of weeks. And if it's not a matter of weeks, it's probably a matter of months. If we had to put level 4 restrictions on London, it would cost in the order of £7 billion a month. Now, if you were doing a risk-based analysis, would you really take that risk, or would you be investing in the future? I don't know. What would I do if I was the CEO of a major water company serving that area? Something for me to think about. But there's some good news on the horizon, because we can do more. Because if you actually look at some of the mechanisms in the background, we do indeed have a national policy statement for wastewater. So it is starting to look at a big picture. If any of you pick up a copy of the recent AMP review, again, encouraging us to look at the big picture and get into long-term planning. The problem we don't have at the moment is we don't actually have a national policy statement for water. There's no overarching infrastructure plan for water. And that's what's needed to look at those big strategic decisions and to drive that big strategic investment. And actually what we have found is once you start looking at it, there are alternative ways in terms of delivering that investment. I mentioned earlier the Thames tunnel. Now, many people read in the press all the stories about Thames Water delivering this big project called the Thames Tideway Tunnel. Actually, there's a bit of myth and legend in there, because when we get there, it won't be Thames Water that's delivering the Thames Tunnel at all. What we're actually doing is creating a separate business, a separate infrastructure provider, who will have the responsibility for funding and financing that tunnel and actually delivering the tunnel. It'll be a separate business under a separate licence. So already we're delivering new models in terms of how we can deliver some of these big infrastructure projects outside of the industry as it stands today, which I say has been extremely successful in delivering the day job. And what do I mean by the day job? That's over £100 billion of investment that's already been delivered. But actually, when you're looking at tunnels when you look at projects like the Thames Tideway Tunnel, or you look at major projects like a new reservoir, actually they can and should sit outside the day job. The staggering fact is the last time a reservoir was built for the southeast of England was over 40 years ago. Not this one, this is the Queen Mary Reservoir, and that was actually built in 1927. If you look carefully, you can see some of the guys that were in the earlier photo. Changing subject again, let's move on to something else which is quite topical, metering. Now, I've sat in presentations and meetings and I've heard some companies say, well, actually, we don't need metering. Metering's a waste of time and a waste of money, because what it's all about is about encouraging customers to save water, and you don't need meters to do that. All you need is a big engagement plan to encourage people to save water. Actually, if you get underneath it, metering isn't just about meters. It's far deeper. Now people are thinking, what the hell is he talking about? Because what you need to understand is once you are installing meters, and some companies are well advanced on this, the benefits you see are far wider than just driving a customer behaviour and just driving water consumption through the tap. What metering does enable you to do is to really start understanding your network and your assets and how you can manage what's going on. Because before you even look at what's going on, the benefits you see through metering, and particularly on leakage, only half of it will come from actually the customer behaviour. The other half comes from actually you understanding your network and how you manage that network. Because without those meters being installed, quite frankly, we simply don't know where all the water's going. And we're just embarking on our progressive metering campaign. We launched it last week, and we're following in the footsteps of others. And see Matthew here this morning. I think Southern Water's done a fantastic job on their metering campaign, and certainly in terms of engaging the customers, and we're trying to learn from some of those lessons. But we're going a step further now. We're installing smart meters. The days of dumb meters are long gone. The days of our AMR meters, where you drive by and pick up the readings, you don't need to go and read every single one, in my view, they're long gone. We're now into the realms of smart meters, and these meters can actually give you a reading on average every 15 minutes. Now you're going to ask me, why do you want to actually read meters every 15 minutes? What customer out there wants to read their meter every 15 minutes? Well, most customers don't. But actually, there's some other tools that you can start looking at. Peckham High Street. I mentioned earlier, we've got a big problem with lots of flats, lots of rented properties. Lots of our properties in London, quite frankly, aren't metered. Only about a quarter of our customers are metered. But when you actually start installing meters, not just on each individual property, but actually start installing bulk meters on some of the flats, you start learning a hell of a lot about, firstly, what the customers are doing, but also what your network's doing. This particular block of flats, you can see it's not a big development. The amount of water going through that block, it never actually got to zero. The lowest it ever got was 33 litres a minute at any time in the day. What happened in there? Well, they had a leaking supply pipe under a flower bed and 2 leaking valves. We fixed those, and what do you find? You finally get to zero. And that's just one small example of what you can do across your network. But in doing so, we also recognise we've got to provide support to customers, and this is where we've learned some great lessons from Southern and some of the other companies. It's not a case of putting people on a meter and changing their bill straight away. You can do that over time. But it's also about providing practical help and financial help to those customers, fixing their leaks free of charge, giving them help in terms of paying a bill, giving advice on water saving. So that's a bit of what's going on now, but just to round off very briefly in terms of, well, what next? Well, if you get beyond AMP6, I think there's some real big issues for the industry to deal with. Where will this new approach to customer engagement actually take us? What's it going to look like in 5, 10, 15 years' time? How are we going to deal with those big risk resilient issues in terms of what do you do when we see a change in the climate? We see a 20% drop in the summer rainfall. What's consolidation going to mean for the industry? And consolidation, don't get me wrong, it's not about the big companies going out there and buying up the small companies. Will it mean different things to the wholesale side and the retail side? You go back to those business plans that people are preparing at the moment, I can guarantee that everyone in those business plans will be talking about upgrading their IT systems, putting in new systems to deal with the advent of competition across the South East. Is it right for all the companies in the South East to all be building their own new IT systems? Or should they be doing something together? I'll leave you that question. And actually, when you get a bit deeper and a bit further, it's not just about water. When you look a bit further into the distance, you see the advent of smart meters, you see what we're doing, you then start getting joined up with the energy companies. That's what's really going to drive the household bill. It's not just looking at the water bill, it's looking at the utility bills combined. We've got to start people saving water, not just for water, because it's actually driving their energy bills. And that's what we're going to see in the future. And I've already talked about the opportunities for looking at new infrastructure. So in closing, I think you'll find this is fact anyway. I think you'll find that the industry is indeed embracing the move to the customer-led business plans, and that's been the biggest change that we've seen. Affordability, absolutely key, but so is good value. And I think we do recognise that different companies are at different stages in their cycle and their involvement. We have seen some change, but what we also know is you get into radical change and that's going to drive even further change. And I think you're going to see some massive changes over the next 5 to 10 years. And that's not just going to be at the top end in terms of retail and competition, it's all going to be also in the way they actually deliver our programs and working with others. I've talked about resilience and making sure that we have got the balance right and we are thinking of the future. And I've also talked about alternative approaches to infrastructure. And beyond AMP6, what's it going to be? Is it going to be competition? Is it going to be consolidation? Or is it going to be collaboration? Personally, I think it's all going to be all three. Thank you very much.